The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Welcome to another edition of Mission Minded with Michael Coleman. He's the executive director at the Jimmie Hale Mission. He's been in that position now for over 3 years, and he's a good friend of mine. Love doing this Mission Minded show. It's keeping your mind, your mission on your mind. Michael, how you doing, brother? Everything good?
Doing fantastic, and can't wait to jump into our subject today because it's something that the vast majority of people don't do well, really don't know how to do. There's a lot of fear associated with it, but as far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely essential if you want to grow your nonprofit or really grow your business. So I'm just excited to talk about it and delve into it.
Yeah, 3 words describe it best. Collaboration is key. And as a small business owner myself, and certainly as the executive director of one of the best non-for-profits we have in the state in the Southeast, you realize that collaboration is super important. And I realize that sometimes when people are passionate about a particular idea, particularly a non-for-profit, they may have some experience in it themselves. Maybe they were traumatized by a particular situation. They want to go out and help. And I know this from a stereotypical standpoint, guys hate asking for help. Guys don't like to collaborate. I can figure this out. That's why we don't ask for directions, right? And that's before, of course, Garmin and Google Maps and everything else came out. Now we can figure it out on our own and act like we knew what we were talking about. But just talk about in general terms. You mentioned the fact that collaboration is kind of a scary word for a lot of people, and they're fearful of it. Well, why is that?
Well, and I'll illustrate this with just a couple of practical examples. Before I came to Jimmie Hale Mission, I was still in the nonprofit workspace. It created a nonprofit to help equip people who were kind of stuck in poverty, didn't really have the skills to enter the workforce successfully. And so Hyundai comes to town, and in Montgomery, Alabama, and all the outlying agencies that were there. And all of a sudden, there's these great paying jobs, but they can't get people in to their facility to come in and work through their issues and be able to show up on time. And so every one of these factories were having trouble with retaining good people. And so I simply went to them and said, listen, let us help create a pipeline. You have people in your community that are willing to do the work and are able to do the work, but they just need a little hand-holding. They need some training. They need those. We will come along and partner with you and do that for you. But every human resource person I talked to did not have the time or I think the willingness to sit down and be able to plan, because all they're worried about is, I got to get guys on the line right now. I got to get people on the line. I got to make this part. So their hair's on fire. They couldn't stop down. They couldn't stop for just a few minutes and say, you know what? If we looked at this strategically for a little bit, we can solve some long-term problems if we bring more resources working together. But it was just so hard for them to stop and see. So that's just one of 1,000 different reasons people have trouble collaborating, because they're trying to do something in the now. All they can see is exactly what's in front of them. They're not strategic in their thinking. They can't see down the road. They can't see where I'm doing something along the same lines as these other people. Let's do this together and make it the best we can be. So just a whole heap of challenges associated with that.
And of course, one of those collaborative efforts is normally for a non-for-profit with some type of government agency. And when you say government agency, you're like, I'm good. I'll figure it out on my own. But that sometimes is where a lot of the money is, right?
Yeah. So I talk about this all the time is you have nonprofits, and some, like we are donor-based in the mission. And most faith-based organizations are donor-based. Because the government it's not that government won't partner with faith-based organizations, but lots of times there's just challenges there. And faith-based organizations are a little hesitant to get involved with government funding because of fear that the government will control their message or how they execute their duties and responsibilities. However, one of the things I think we don't look at, I think appropriately, and government doesn't and nonprofits don't, is that government is good about bringing money. They can bring resources. But services, they're not real good at that because services require interaction between people and in an effective way. So government recognizes, hey, we'll do the grants, we'll throw money at people, but we need them to do the services. And so lots of people who are in that space say, okay, no, I've got my funding. This is how we do business, and this is how we're going to move forward, without being able to step back and go, yes, this is how we do it. But, our goal is really accomplishing these bigger visions, these bigger ideas. And so we'll never get there how we are right now. And unfortunately, so many people just say, oh, well, it is what it is. I am in the space that I'm in, rather than saying, you know what, with a little bit of planning, with a little bit of coordination, with a little bit of sharing vision and sharing resources, we can bring to bear a much better solution that helps the community that we're here to serve. And there's challenges. People don't want to give up control. People want it to be their idea. There's pride. There's just all the human brokenness that goes into it that typically gets in the way. But nothing is as special as when you can bring different entities together with a shared common vision and really do make dynamic changes in a community. And it is possible.
Well, the thing I think you do a great job, because I know that you've met with the mayor and I'm sure you've met with the governor and people know who you are. You let people know, at least in the government, and the people that can push money your direction when you need help, you let them know you're there. You hey, listen, I'm here. And you want to collaborate with them. You want to work with them, and not necessarily needing any of their help. But it's certainly important for people to know who the Jimmie Hale Mission is, how long you've been in operation, and how you do business, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if I just kept to the Jimmie Hale Mission space in the world, all I'm thinking about is, okay, how do we take care of our guys? How do we reach more donors? Just the typical stuff. But I'm looking outside of Jimmie Hale because I believe that we bring something to the table that no other organization here in Birmingham does. There's an expertise, there's a passion for the homeless and those trapped in addiction. And so we're not just interested in those who are here, we're interested in those who are lost like that in our community as a whole. So when we recently went to go speak with the mayor asked me that question, how do you solve this problem? How do you deal with that? And so we got in this great conversation about how can we work together. And one of the things that came out of that is the city of Birmingham has a problem every year, as most cities do, I think, large cities. What do you do with those when it gets freezing at night? Mm-hmm. What about the homes? Because the last thing anybody wants is to go out there and find that somebody froze to death on the sidewalk. Yeah. And there's just so there's some emergency care sometimes that has to be offered. And so even though our goal is to bring people into our program and to change their lives, we also are compassionate to the idea of, hey, there's some circumstances where we need to bring them in out of that. And so the city not only doesn't have the facilities, but even sometimes when they do secure a facility, they don't have the expertise to deal with their clients. So I told the mayor, I said, listen, I don't even want anything in return. Here's what I do. Here's what I'm offering to you. Because we care about this community and we care about those who are homeless and their safety, we will from now on take that over for the city. We will not only provide the facility for warming at night, but we will provide the expertise, the counseling, the case management, all that's necessary. Because ultimately our goal is we hope to talk them into coming into our program for us to be able to resolve the long-term issues. And when I told the mayor that, he shook my hand, looked at me, and he said very slowly and deliberately, that is a really big deal. And so it makes us feel good. Yes, it's a little bit more work on our part. Yes, it requires a little bit more planning. Yes, we have to meet more with the city, and sometimes you run into that government bureaucracy. And if it were just about our organization, I wouldn't go to that trouble. But my passion is not about the organization so much as it's about what the organization does, and that's impact the homeless and addicted in Birmingham to change lives. So whatever leads me there, I have to, as a leader of the organizations, I have to be willing to to join in that collaboration or offer that spirit of collaboration to solve the bigger problems.
Michael Coleman joins us here, of course. This is his show, Mission Minded. We keep your mind on your mission on your mind. It's about how to run a non-for-profit, do it successfully. We've gone through everything at the beginning of a business, from visionary statements to mission statements to everything else. I do want to tangent off a little bit because it is the biggest news going on, and it certainly will be for the next few weeks, and that is the Ukrainian invasion. You talk about having a plan in place. I wonder what the plan is in Poland right now, because they've got 1 million refugees coming across the border. In a lot of cases, I'm assuming those people aren't going to be going back to their home country, Ukraine, but can you just talk a little bit about what they must be going through from an infrastructural standpoint and certainly from a non-for-profit standpoint, because they've got 1 million more people in their country that they weren't planning on?
Yeah, so, I mean, and this is such a timely topic. I mean, my heart is aching for those people who are having to leave their homes. I've seen shelters where women who are giving birth down in the basements of these makeshift labor rooms. And there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of unknown. So my heart, my thoughts, my prayers continually go up for the Ukrainian refugees. But if you've never been connected to that, you want to talk about the need for collaboration. Because imagine 100,000 people walk across your border, and there's even more than that. Mm-hmm. But 100,000 people walk across your border, and you say, how do I take care of those? And so you've got to have a place for them to sleep. You've got to have a place for them to get out of the rain. You've got to give enough food for that many people, and food that won't spoil. And those are just the basics. Forget the necessary medical care, because you've got elderly and you've got people that are going to die while they're in this. So what do you do with the dead bodies? And what do you do about sanitary issues? Can you imagine all of a sudden having to provide toilet space and room for 100,000 people? And then you've got safety issues. So you could have somebody there who preys on women or preys on children. And so there's so many things that somebody has to think about. And there's nobody in Poland, there's not one organization, I don't care how big you are, who can think about all those things, but they don't have the resources themselves. They will never have an effective place for them to reside and give effective care without a full collaborative effort, not just with, and of course this is going to cross many things. You're going to have nonprofit care like International Red Cross, they will come to bear. And then the U.S. government and other governments are going to throw a lot of money and resources, and they'll probably ship tents and food packages and medical supplies and all those kind of things. But you have to have the people on the end to receive it, to keep it from being stolen, going to the black market. So there's that security element. You've got people who have issues, psychological issues. Can you imagine the mental health and the trauma that's going on with everybody there? That I saw children crying on a bus as they were leaving, saying, well, I'm leaving my father behind to fight, so they don't know whether their loved one is alive or dead. Yeah. So many things going on, and that problem would seem so overwhelming if organizations and people were not willing to come together, and volunteers, and say, listen, I don't bring any single cure, but hey, I want to be a part of it. And that's what kind of makes, if you have to find a silver lining in a very, very dark cloud, it's like 9/11 in our own country. Yeah. How just for a short time our country came together, and our country all loved each other, and we were Americans for just a short bit. And yes, it didn't last as long as we had hoped it would, but there is a crisis can bring about a uniting factor, a heart to work together. But unfortunately, that's not the norm. It's not the norm in our own communities. And even though the problems we're trying to deal with, homelessness and addiction, those are sometimes get to crisis levels. But if it doesn't affect us, if it's not in the news every night, then we tend not to want to solve that problem. Or go to the same sacrifices level of sacrifice to solve some of these problems.
Well, and to your proof, I mean, just look at our immigration issues we have south of our border. I mean, we can't take care of the people that want to come into this country voluntarily, and it's really a sad situation. Our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to those folks, and unfortunately, it appears it's going to go on a little while longer. You're listening to Mission Minded here with Michael Coleman. He's the executive director of Jimmie Hale Mission. It's a great show, and of course, it airs every Wednesday at noon and 7. And now go to Spotify, Tony Kurre Radio, Tony Kurre Radio, that's with a K. Search Tony Kurre Radio or Mission Minded, and you'll find all of Michael's shows up, and you go back and listen to him, binge listen to him at all. So you got some common challenges of non-profit government partnerships. I want you to kind of go through these because I think they're really interesting. And we'll start with number one, the different cultures, the slower processes, the red tape, and everything else. Go there.
Yeah. So, all right. So if you think who's going to come to bear on the problem of homelessness, let's say you have 3 nonprofits who serve this community, and then you have the mayor, government organizations, and government grants. What happens is typically is you have nonprofits who come together who have different paces. So, for instance, I tend to be a fast mover. Some may even accuse me of moving too fast. But when we see what we're moving for, we cut right to the chase and we go for it. And so if I come along and am working with another nonprofit that I'm depending on for services, then lots of times they are not working at that same pace. It doesn't make them wrong. It's just everybody's working at different speeds with different motivations. Sometimes there's more red tape. Anytime you work with government, it seems like it's just endless red tape. But even nonprofits have that. I have certain authorities given to me by my board of directors, but if I'm going to go into a big collaborative effort and it's going to require resources from us, then typically that's something that the board likes me to get approved through them. Well, my board meets every month and may be able to go through that and deal with that in a timely manner, whereas another one, the board meets every quarter. And maybe it's kind of dragging their feet a little bit. And so, and I also have to come to terms with the fact I never question or want to question somebody's motives. But the reality is I know people in this space, not just in this community, but all around, who are just, they are so passionate about what they're doing and the impact that they're making. And then there's some people who've been, you've seen it. Government has a reputation of having unmotivated people, and that's not fair to people who work in government, but we've all seen it where somebody's just taking their time, they're just waiting the clock out. So all of that, the slower processes, the red tape, the different motivations, it's just different cultures. And so it's a challenge sometimes to come together, and some people say it's just too hard to do, and it's not. It's just you have to build and make clear those expectations up front. Nonprofits are also known for just absolutely lacking trust with each other. And so what ends up doing is you'll hear me use this term a lot. We do a lot of kingdom building, like, okay, Jimmie Hale's here, I'm going to build my kingdom. And this other nonprofit's over, they're going to build their kingdom. And it's almost like we build them as these fortresses. And I don't really want to show you how much money I'm raising, or I don't want to be transparent with my donor base, because you're going to come along and steal that donor. And so when you go into it with a lack of trust or just distrust of one another, that's not going to bode well for how well you can communicate. I mean, how successful you're going to be. So then again, this is another reason why it gets hard. So if you don't have trust, how do you gain trust? You have to spend time building a relationship. And there are people who would rather have a root canal than have to build a relationship. It's painful to them. They're introverted. They talk to people because they have to, but they'd rather sit in there and write a government grant and be left alone all day and have to spend time working with people. And
let me ask you this, Michael, because I've worked in non-for-profits for a period of time. I understand there are lists, and I understand that much like radio stations, we have one radio station listen to another radio station. They hear clients on that station. They start going after them. They start bringing their money. How relevant is that as far as in donor stealing? Because if you've got a great service and you're doing a wonderful community job from a non-for-profit standpoint, you don't like to think that people are going to be dipping in other pockets, and hopefully there's enough money to go around to all of them from one individual. But how relevant is it that people actually go after donors and steal them?
I tell you what people would like. It's not so much the individual donor, but it's access to a donor database or stealing a list of donors.
Yeah.
But here's the reality. I never am afraid about that, because here's why. If somebody can come along and sell what they're doing and it's being more effective than me, then that's my fault. If I can't appeal to my donors and excite my donors about the lives that are, if I'm not producing changed lives and somebody comes along and says, hey, I'm doing this, well, that's on me. I'm very confident in our approach and our commitment. So I myself don't necessarily worry about that. Plus, in the donor world, I can go out and buy a list, and you would not believe how itemized these lists are. Let's say, for instance, my demographic was conservative women between ages 35 and 55 and incomes of over $100,000. I can go buy that list right now.
Yeah.
And send out to them a mailing or contact them in some way. So those lists are available anyway. So I think sometimes, but that's an old school thinking. Hey, I've built up this database and I don't want anybody else to know it. And I'm saying we're to the point where we got to get past that kind of stuff. We got to be authentic and say, look, there's value in what you're doing. There's value in what I'm doing, but there's a lot of value when we can bring the force of our two agencies together to bear on this problem. And you have to go into it going, well, here's our approach, here's our culture, here's who I am. And it may be different, but I bet we can find a common way and a common goal that we can fight equally hard for. And takes a little bit, but hey, it's worth it in the end, because what you can do together is far greater than what you can do alone.
You mentioned this a little earlier in our show. This is Mission Minded here with Michael Coleman, the executive director from the Jimmie Hale Mission, a show that runs super excited exclusively here on Tony Curre Radio at noon and 7 every Wednesday, and again on Spotify. You can go back and listen to all the episodes on demand whenever you want. Just search Tony Curre Radio. You talked about fearing of losing control. You've got this organization, you have this passion, you have this vision, and then you're collaborating with someone that perhaps sees your vision a little differently. And in order to get what you need, you've got to change things up a little bit. Talk about that. And then, of course, the lack of capacity, and that is to have the staff, space, time, and other necessary things to actually make it happen.
Yeah. And sometimes, again, I can be guilty of this very thing, the fear of losing control. And what I have to understand is I am not the keeper of good ideas. As a matter of fact, I surround myself with people who are different than I am for that very reason, to be able to pour into me and help me see things from a broader perspective. But when I get locked into an idea, I can be guilty of that very same thing of like, hey, I want to collaborate with you, but hey, this way is the best way. And so I really have to understand and be very intentional about, okay, what's the big goal here? The goal is not do it my way. The goal is have the greatest impact on those we're trying to serve. And that does not necessarily mean it's my way. So as a leader, to facilitate better collaboration is, instead of pouring into that fear, stepping into it, I need to step back and bring a lot more humility and say, listen, this person may come out differently, or his or her approach may be different, but hey, it's just as valid as, their intentions, their heart, their passion is just as valid as mine is. And so it does, as a leader, I have to step back and say, hey, this is not about you. This is not about my ideas. It's about what is best for the people we're trying to serve. And so I try to do my best, although just like everybody else, I have my blind spots and I get convinced. But I will tell you this as well, that there's a distinction between the fear of losing control and being convinced that a process is the best way. Now, when I collaborate together and we get all the players in town, I say, here's what I think is best. If the group collectively believes that another way is more effective, then I will I will step back and relent to the group. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with, if you're an expert in an area and you feel like you know how to do it, go in there and fight for it. Because if that's what you believe, but when it's all said and done, don't blow up the collaboration because you're not getting your way. Because when you roll over to the lack of capacity, we're already starting sometimes is we don't dream big. We don't think big. We think, I'll give you a good example. Lots of homeless shelters goes, we really can't change homelessness. All we can do is give people a bed and a meal. And I'm doing my best to turn that notion on its head and say, absolutely, we can do better and we can do different. And we can take somebody who is homeless and in addiction on the street, and we can create a pathway. Now, that pathway may be 3 years down the road, but we can create a pathway for that individual to become a self-sufficient and productive citizen who is able to provide for himself and his family and lives a fulfilling life. No, we can do that. Now, it may require way more than what we're used to. It may require a much bigger vision, but I'm not going to let tiny thinking and fear keep me from doing that. So lots of times we can't get people to collaborate because all they can see is like what's in front of them, and they can't see the dream is too big, the vision's too big. And so sometimes it's that fear. It's all those other elements that I talked about. They fear they don't have the staff to participate, or the space, or the time, or other necessary resources. But we have to see is what we can do collectively. And that's just really a tough bridge for some people to cross.
Yeah, we only have a couple more minutes, and I did want to get into and I know we don't like to talk politics here, but it's something you have to deal with, obviously, because you're dealing with government agencies. I'm sure that you have been in a situation where you've sat down with someone and said, okay, listen, we're going to do this for you. And much like you said earlier in this conversation, we don't want anything, just do this for us. And it worked out well. But have you dealt with politicians where, quite frankly, the things that they're demanding or they want from you in return just doesn't work for you? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I've always made it very clear, because particularly when I'm faith-based. Now, of course, we're in Alabama, and I know the listeners will be all over the world could hear this. In our part of the country, most of our politicians understand that our culture is a very faith-based culture in Alabama. And so talking about your faith or being a person of faith is not something that's rare. I would say it's more the norm. So it's a little bit easier. But when you get like from the federal level and collaborating on that kind of level, then sometimes you don't meet the same kind of people or the people who share the same kind of perspective as you do. And so there are times where I will tell anybody, I will collaborate with you, I will discuss with you. And even if we can't find that common ground, I believe I can help shape your own vision. And so that's kind of what I offer. There's sometimes when I absolutely refuse to collaborate is first if somebody's causing me to compromise what I believe is true. So that's not just faith-based things, but it's approaches. Like there's all sorts of debate as to how to care for the homeless. So you look out in San Francisco, and we've all seen pictures to where they built these tent cities for the homeless. Yep. And I think that's tragic. Now, the show's not long enough to discuss all the reasons, and maybe we'll pick that up one week and just take that approach on and to talk about why that's not effective. But it's not. And so what's happened is you have people defecating on sidewalks and people just trying to get back and forth to their homes and work, and there's threats, and it's just a big old mess.
That is certainly something that I'd love to get your thoughts. Because in a lot of ways, we talk about tough love and we talk about enabling to create these cities. I certainly get where you're coming from. And I don't think that's the right thing, because the more comfortable you allow someone to be in a non-comfortable situation is not a good thing. So, hey, Michael.
Yeah, matter of fact, maybe I'll do the next show on that.
Let's do it. Let's do it next week. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Great show. Mission Minded. You hear it every single week, noon at 7 right here on Wednesdays. And better yet, listen to it anytime you want on demand at Spotify at Tony Curre Radio. That's Curry with a K. Tony Curre Radio. Just search Mission Minded or Tony Curre Radio, and you'll see that beautiful graphic and Michael Coleman's name, and you can listen to the shows anytime you want. Michael, thank you so much. Until next week, brother.
Enjoyed it as always. Thank you for those out there listening, and please reach out to us if there's any questions or challenges you have. We'd love to tackle those and help you through them.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curre Radio.